Hello, and welcome back. I know the last stretch of this preparation can feel like a strange mix of adrenaline and exhaustion, the kind of pressure that only an examination capable of shaping the whole course of your working life can produce. This is the Sociology Desk, issue 82, and today we are working with three current stories: a campaign against caste reservation, a national caste count, and a new law regulating artificial intelligence and social media. For each one, I am going to show you exactly which thinker to anchor your answer on, and exactly how to turn that thinker into marks. Let's start with a story making a lot of noise among young people right now. A campaign calling itself the Reservation Hatao Andolan, demanding that college seats and government jobs be decided purely on merit, not on caste based reservation. For your paper, this falls under paper 2, the chapter on social classes in India, and it connects directly to the caste system chapter as well. Here is the idea you need to get completely comfortable with. When people say, give jobs on merit alone, they are treating merit as if it fell from the sky, as if it has nothing to do with caste. But sociologists have long shown that merit is manufactured inside a stratified society. The French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu called this cultural capital, the language, the schooling, the manners a child picks up, simply by being born into an already advantaged family. When that inherited advantage gets converted into an exam rank, and that exam rank gets called pure merit, Bourdieu called this symbolic violence, a kind of domination so smooth it does not even look like domination. And on the Indian side, Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar had already made a related point decades earlier. He said, Indian caste is not simply a division of labor. It is a division of laborers, arranged one above the other in what he called graded inequality. This is where the Indian sociologist Andre Beteille becomes your anchor thinker for a 20-mark answer on this topic. Beteille argued that modern India runs on two principles at once: a constitutional promise of equality and a lived everyday reality of inequality. And he called this a disharmonic social system because the norm and the practice pull in two different directions instead of matching up. He also pointed out that the very class leading a campaign like this one is usually the urban middle class, a class that built its own position over decades of unequal access to schools and colleges. Your one quotable line is this: the coexistence of formal equality and substantive inequality produces a disharmonic social system in which constitutional values and lived hierarchy pull apart. Let me put my examiner's hat on for a moment, because this decides your marks. A script that scores around 14 out of 20 will usually open with something like, reservation is a topic of great debate in India, and then spend half the answer describing the Reservation Hatao Andolan itself. That is narration, not sociology, and it caps your score. A script that scores 18 or 19 out of 20 opens with a structural claim, something like, merit is not a neutral category. It is produced inside a stratified society. It names Beteille's disharmonic system and Ambedkar's graded inequality exactly, with the correct vocabulary. It mentions the Reservation Hatao Andolan in exactly one or two sentences, only as evidence. It brings in a counter-angle, for instance, Bourdieu's cultural capital, or the policy alternative of subcategorization and the creamy layer. And it closes with an actual position, not a summary. Remember this for every answer this year. The current event is your evidence. The theory is your destination. Here is a question in exactly the form you should expect. In light of recent youth-led campaigns demanding merit-based selection over caste-based reservation, critically examine the theoretical validity of merit as a neutral criterion in a stratified society. Take a moment, sketch an outline in your head. Opening line, three thinkers, one piece of evidence, one closing position. Our second story is the digital socio-economic and caste census that India is preparing to roll out, the first full caste enumeration exercise of its kind in about a century. This sits inside Paper 2, the Population Dynamics chapter, but it also has a very rich methodology angle that touches Paper 1's Research Methods chapter. Here is the idea to sit with. We usually think a census just records what is already there, like a photograph. But sociologists argue that enumeration is an act of classification, and classification changes what it counts. When a census form asks you to write one caste name in one box, it forces a fluid, locally negotiated identity into a single, fixed, comparable category. That act itself can harden a boundary that used to be much softer and more context-dependent. Your primary anchor here is the Indian sociologist M.N. Srinivas, who gave us one of the most useful distinctions in the whole discipline: the difference between the book view and the field view. The book view is the caste name written on an official document, the textual, administrative version. The field view is caste as it is actually lived, argued over, and locally ranked, something you only discover through real fieldwork. Your quotable line is this: the book view of caste as a fixed textual order differs sharply from the field view uncovered through direct village fieldwork. The census, in other words, gives you book view data, dressed up as complete social reality. Now the examiner's view on this one. A 14-mark script will describe the caste census, when it happens, what a composite backwardness index is, and stop there. A 19-mark script does three things differently. First, it distinguishes the census category from the lived social reality it claims to represent. Second, it brings in Max Weber's idea of the ideal type, the notion that any social science category, including a census box, is a deliberately simplified, one-sided construct built for comparison, never a full photograph of reality. And it uses that exact term. Third, it adds G.S. Ghurye's historical point that colonial-era census operations did not just record caste, they actually hardened caste boundaries that had been softer before. Use the census itself in only one or two sentences, then close by saying enumeration should continue, but its categories must be treated as working tools, not final truths. Here is your practice question. Is the caste category produced by census enumeration an empirical reality or an administrative construct? Comment with reference to Srinivas and Weber. Notice, this is what we call a meta-theoretical question. It is asking you to question the very tool of measurement, not just describe what it measures. Our third story takes us abroad, to the European Union's new Artificial Intelligence Act, which brought in fresh transparency rules in early August, and to Australia, where recent studies suggest its under-16 social media ban is not actually keeping teenagers off these platforms. This sits inside Paper 1 under Sociological Thinkers, specifically Robert King Merton. Here is the concept to master. Robert Merton, an American sociologist, drew a famous distinction between manifest functions and latent functions. A manifest function is the openly stated, intended purpose of a rule. For example, protecting children online. A latent function is an unintended, often unnoticed consequence of that same rule. In Australia, the ban's manifest function was to keep under-16s off social media. But early evidence suggests a latent, unintended effect. Teenagers are simply moving to smaller, less visible platforms where there is even less oversight than before. Robert Merton is your primary anchor thinker for this entire answer. Your one quotable formulation is this: latent functions are the unintended and often unrecognized consequences of an institutional arrangement, distinct from its openly stated manifest purpose. For a second layer of depth, bring in George Herbert Mead's idea of the generalized other, the wider community whose attitudes a young person internalizes while forming a sense of self. Today, that generalized other is increasingly an algorithm driven feed rather than a real diffuse community. And that connection is exactly what impresses an examiner. Examiner's view again. A 14-mark answer spends most of its length explaining what the Artificial Intelligence Act says, clause by clause, and what Australia's ban involves. A 19-mark answer opens by naming the tension between manifest and latent functions directly. It names Merton's concept exactly, not just unintended consequences in vague words. It mentions the European law and the Australian study in one or two sentences only, purely as evidence. Then, for real depth, it brings in a counter-thinker, Jürgen Habermas, and his idea that the system increasingly colonizes the life world, meaning technical, code-based control is replacing the communicatively negotiated norms that used to shape growing up. It closes by saying regulation must target how platforms function as a reference group for young people, not just what content is visible on them. Say it with me one more time. The event is your evidence, the theory is your destination. Your practice question here. In the light of evidence that Australia's under 16 social media ban is failing to achieve its stated aim, critically examine the distinction between manifest and latent functions of protective digital regulation. Let's pull it all together before we close. 1. Merit is not a neutral fact. It is produced inside a stratified society, and your anchor thinkers are Andre Beteille and Dr. Ambedkar. 2. A census category is not a mirror of society. It is a construct, and your anchor thinkers are M.N. Srinivas and Max Weber. 3. Protective law always carries a hidden, latent effect alongside its stated, manifest one, and your anchor thinker is Robert Merton. 3 current events, 3 thinkers you can now deploy with total confidence. That is today's brief. I know this preparation stretches on for months, and some days the syllabus feels bigger than you are. But every thinker you learn to deploy with this kind of precision is one more mark you were not getting before. And those marks add up faster than they feel like they do right now. If you would like the complete answer blocks, the model answers, and the full flashcards for everything we covered today, drop your email in the comments or write to us directly at team@upscdesk.com and we will share the subscription details. Keep writing, keep sharpening, and I will see you tomorrow.